Hello, Jason Milligan here. I'm obviously not in a church service right now. I am doing this from my office at home. Our church is heavily staffed, and it would have been really hard to get a date to book the church for a sermon and actually do music ministry outside of that. So I've been on the road for a few days, but I hope I can share the Word of God with you from the comfort of my own office here. So let's start with the Word. Let's start with the Word here. We'll go to Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. And yes, I'm at the age where I pull my glasses off to read. So the Bible says, "Now as they were traveling along, he entered a village," Jesus. He entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. And she had a sister called Mary, who was also seated at the Lord's feet and was listening to his word. But Martha was distracted with all the preparations. And she came up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do the serving by myself? Then tell her to help me." But the Lord answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her." So Jesus and his disciples, they're on their way from some place where Jesus had been ministering, and they're likely headed to Jerusalem. They stop in this village that is most likely Bethany, from all we can tell, where Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus live. They're friends of Jesus, and we get to know them better in the Gospel of John. They welcome him in, right? Martha immediately goes about preparing and serving their guests, while Mary sits at Jesus' feet, listening to what he said, listening to his words. Martha, she's obviously overjoyed that her sister has chosen to sit and listen and cannot wait to hear all about it. She even commends Jesus for allowing her to experience the fullness of doing all the work by herself. Kidding, of course. She was not happy, right? So when I was a youngster back in the 1900s, my family, mid-1900s or late 1900s, right? I'm not that old. My family and my extended family was very, very active in our local church. We were the proverbial, every time the church doors were open, kind of family. If they were not open, well, we all had keys. My paternal grandfather was our senior pastor. We just called him pastors back then. He was the lead pastor. We had some others, but you get my drift. But he also served in some various district roles for our denomination. So he was a busy man. My parents also very involved in everything from Sunday school to Bible quizzing. They served on the church board. You name it, we were there. And it wasn't just for our church events at all. It was for district activities as well, camps, retreats. We were always busy with church functions. As I look back at my childhood, I didn't know or didn't even understand a life outside of being active in the church. It felt good to do things for the Lord, right? How could it not? How could it not feel good? It's kind of part of who we are as Christians. We serve, and when we see a need, we do our best to fill it. We're kind of trained from that way when we're young. Speaking of being young, when I was 13, I was handed the curriculum to our Sunday school, the teenage curriculum, and I was asked to substitute because our teacher was going to be gone for a few weeks. Let me say that again. I was 13 years old. To be in the youth group, you had to be 13 years old. So I was one of the youngest, if not the youngest person in the class, and they asked me to teach it. Now, I'm not saying that to brag. I had no business teaching that class. I was too young. Everyone in there was older than me. They were older cousins. They were old friends that we had known since I was a child. I had no business teaching the class. Now, I don't say that to complain either. I think the church had good intentions, but just not always the best execution, right? But my yes to teaching that class, it kind of started an unhealthy trend in my personal life that would take me years to identify, and more years, maybe even decades, to acknowledge that I needed to change. Some of my yeses were definitely exactly what God wanted for me, but some of them were just me trying to make sure that something that I thought needed to get done got done. Isn't that the way we all kind of operate sometimes? We see a need and we fill it. So fast forward a few years, and my inability to say no when someone needed help or something needed done around the church, it had me busier. This is one of my grandpa's favorite sayings. It had me busier than a two-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. I'll give you a moment to get a visual on that. But I was busy. I was just busy all the time, doing stuff for the Lord. And I'll be honest, I was having a complete burnout in ministry. It was a smaller church. I loved the people. Many of them were family and lifelong friends. They had invested in me for many years. They had taught my Sunday school classes. They had been my youth leaders and workers in the church. But just like every other church, people come, people go. And as people moved on, in whatever way they went, things were left undone, right? There were holes to be filled. My grandfather got elected as the district superintendent when I was about 16. And a former pastor, it was a youth pastor of ours, had come back. He'd been called to come back and be the lead pastor. He served faithfully. He was great. His family was great. We're still very close friends. He served faithfully for about 4 years, but then he also eventually moved on, and again, another pastor was elected. Also very close friends with him still. But this particular transition, it caused some negative stir in our congregation. I don't want to get into a lot of detail. That's not the purpose of this. But what I'll tell you is, it left some holes in ministry. It left some things undone. It left places where things were not getting completed or accomplished. Right? The church had things to do, and they weren't getting done. At this point, I was about 20 years old. I had been involved in many ministries at the church, but most predominantly in worship. I played guitar and sang. So for this time, I stepped in to fill the role of worship leader for the interim, right? And anybody that has grown up in church knows that interim is a fancy word for indefinite. That decision was great, honestly. And looking back, if I had focused only on being the worship leader, things probably would have gone much differently. But I did not. At some point in my tenure there, which was about 9 years on staff, bivocationally we'll say, I served as a worship pastor, as the associate pastor, as a junior high youth pastor. I was a church board member, taught Sunday school. I was the church administrator for a season. You get it, right? We're just busy. There was even a short season where I was doing all of those jobs at one time. This was in addition to working a full-time secular job. It was a small church, remember? They couldn't afford to hire me full-time. Did I also mention that in the middle of that, I not only met but married my beautiful wife, Carrie, and we had 2 beautiful children who, ironically, have both chosen pastoral ministry. But again, I'm not trying to brag. This is really more of an example, from my opinion, of what not to do. I found myself, I was so busy working for the Lord that my personal relationship with the Lord and frankly with everyone else was failing. Like Martha, I was distracted and worried about many things, but I failed to focus on the one thing that was needed above the rest. I was spread too thin. Now, the irony is that just a few years before all of this started, I was visiting my granny. I was about 18 years old, and my granny was dying of cancer. There was miracles in her life that are a whole other story I'd love to share sometime. But she lay dying of cancer, and she was heavily sedated, and I was visiting with her, and she was not coherent, so I was doing most of the talking, which was not unusual in our relationship. But anyway, I was telling her about everything that was going on in my life, right? All that I had planned, school, work, everything I was doing. And she would give an occasional groan or grunt to acknowledge that she was at least trying to listen, but she was terminal, and hospice was in, and hospice, they were just trying to keep her comfortable for her last few days. In the middle of our mostly one-sided conversation, and what I can only describe as a little miracle, Granny sat up in her bed as if the morphine had just suddenly worn off. And she looked at me as if nothing was wrong. And she said in a clear voice, she said, "Jason, can I give you some advice?" Now, I was obviously surprised, having been looking at her for the last half hour in the state she was in. But I said, sure, Granny, go ahead. And she said 7 words to me that I'll never forget. She said, don't take too much on at once. Don't take too much on at once. Once she said that, she immediately slipped back down into her bed and she returned to her previous state. I stood there stunned for a few moments, contemplating what had just happened. I was really just taken aback. It was such a beautiful little thing looking back, but at the moment I was just very stunned. Later that night, she went home to be with Jesus, but her last words to me are forever etched in my memory. And it was in this ministry season, this busy ministry season, that I had found myself not heeding her advice at all, and then coming to the realization of how good that advice really was. I found myself unfulfilled. I was burning out. I was missing intimacy with the Lord. I was doing all the right things, but feeling pulled from God further and further from God in the process. Now, I'm sure I am not alone in this, right? Many people have taken on too much. They have not followed my granny's advice, and they found themselves in similar situations. The Barna Group, the research group that does all the research for ministry and all sorts of things, they published results in March of 22 that said that 42% of pastors said they were considering leaving their jobs. Now, the good news is Barna says that this has been on the decline in the last few years. So I praise God for that. But most of them are ready to throw in the towel. And they relate it to the stress of the job, to the exhausting expectations, to time away from family, you name it. And if you've been in ministry for any length of time, you can certainly relate. And I don't want to diminish the experience of these pastors. My heart goes out to them. I understand. They need our love. They need our support. They need our prayers. They need us to step in places so they don't have to do everything. But let's be honest. Pastors are not the only ones who are busy, right? Our culture, our American culture, this Western culture is busy. It is built to be busy. There's so many distractions out there pulling and jawing for our attention. We run from one event to another, from a t-ball game to a piano recital to a work lunch to church to, well, you name it, and we will try to fit it into our schedule. That's just the way we roll. I remember a season in our life when I would come home, I would pick up our son, I'd take him to t-ball practice or baseball practice at the time, and then I would run pick my daughter up, take her to piano lessons, and then I would run back and pick him up about the time her piano lesson went in. I'd take her, we'd pick him up, go back home, she'd change clothes, and we'd go to the soccer field. Busy. We're all just busy. And we live by a calendar that is conveniently located on a little device in our pockets that dictates our every move, right? This tells us where to be, what to do, when to do it. We have every bit of technology that would allow us to manage our time better, but we are busier and more distracted now than people have ever been. Research shows that average Americans spend almost 3.5 hours on their mobile device every single day. People check their phones 58 times a day. And we're not even, America's not even the top. Like there's nations that are on it way more than we are. But over half of those 58 times are done while they're at work. That's probably not the best, right? It's probably not the best way to show your employer you're a Christian. Anyway, another subject. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration reported that distracted driving claimed in 2023 claimed over 3,200 lives. It just saddens me to think texting and driving or whatever distracts them is causing accidents and taking people's lives. We as a culture are just too busy. We are, just like Jesus told Martha, we are worried and distracted by many things. Now, these things are not all bad, right? Our children's games and band concerts, our aging parents that we might have to take care of. These are not bad things to be involved. These are good things, right, to be involved in. Good things to take care of. What about church events like Sunday and Wednesday services? You know, we have wedding showers, caring for our church members. There's always an event at the church to do. And then when church members lose a loved one, you know, we're there. God's not asking us to stop being involved in these things, is he? These are good things. And then you add that to trying to maintain healthy relationships with your family, your friends, and most importantly with Jesus. And then just when we think we're busy enough, we get the challenge from our pastor that we should always be in the process of discipling someone. Well, who has time for that? Many pastors, lay people, even people on the fringe of deciding to follow Christ, when they see all this distraction and busyness, it seems inevitable. They might find themselves like I was, questioning, is this Christian life really? Is this really for me at all? If Christianity is about a relationship with Christ, why am I so busy and distracted by things that don't seem to be cultivating that relationship? Why do I feel like I'm at the end of my rope with no hope for change? And maybe you've been there. Maybe you've felt so distracted and so worn out and so tied up that you just don't feel like there's hope. Does God even care what I do for him? Or does anyone else even notice how busy I am working for the Lord? And then, for some of us, the icing on the cake is in the midst of all of our questions, we see someone else who they don't seem busy at all. They never seem bogged down. They always exhibit joy in their life, and we can't understand it or explain it. It seems that we find ourselves in the same shoes as Martha. We've invited Jesus into our home, and we're doing everything we can to make him feel welcome. But somehow we get bogged down with all the work, and Jesus doesn't seem to have a clue how busy we are. I mean, I'm teaching Sunday school class. I'm helping with the teens. I'm helping with the children. I help lead worship. When the doors are open, Lord, I am there. And when they're not, well, you know I have a key. Out of frustration and tension, maybe we, like Martha, we lash out at God. Lord, do you not care? I'm over here wearing myself out. And Mary, whomever that is in my life, seems to be doing nothing. And God, you don't seem to care at all. So I'm the oldest of two children. I have a sister that is almost 4 years younger than I am. I love her very much, and we usually have a really good time together now that we're adults. Not always the case when we were children. We were a lot different. I like to have a clean room. I like to have my chores done. You know the drill. I am a typical firstborn. My sister was much different. She liked to set her own terms about everything, which would drive me crazy. And I'll be honest, it still drives me crazy. And as any good brother, I tried to make her follow the rules, right? That's my job as a big brother, to protect her, to make sure she doesn't get in trouble with our parents or anybody else, right? It's my job. She didn't see it that way, unfortunately. And our opposing perspectives, well, more often than not, it created a hostile situation, if you will. I couldn't understand at the time why my parents would not enforce the rules with her the same way they did with me. And I think that's probably a typical firstborn response. The rules were different for the younger kids, right? Well, in their defense, I see that they tried. She was just wired different than me, and I think we just both wanted everything to be even, to be fair, to be just, right? That's typical. We like fairness. We like everything. Nobody gets preferential treatment. That's kind of how we roll in life. I remember times when there would be the last of something, like a cake, pie, ice cream, or whatever, and we would both want some or all of it. My mom used to make a chocolate chip cheesecake that had like an Oreo crust, and it was so good. It was so good. And we would get to the end of that, and we would want to divide that in half, and each of us have a half. Well, my mom, obviously, she would want us to share it. That's pretty normal. But how would we know if it was split evenly and one of us didn't get less than the other? That's a very important thing. It's a very important issue in a sibling situation. So the rule at our house when I was a kid was that one of us had to divide the two portions in half, and then the other of us got to choose the portion first. So now looking back as a parent, I can see the brilliance in this system. It didn't matter if you were the splitter, the cutter, or the picker. You could be sure that these two portions would be as close in size as humanly possible. I contemplated measuring tapes and laser lines. It had to be perfect. I did not want her getting more than me. She didn't want me getting more than her. It was very meticulously done. This is why, as a firstborn, and we don't know for sure if Martha was the firstborn. There's assumptions, but this is why I totally understand Martha. I want to take her side. I want to cheer her on. Why, Jesus, are you not making Mary help with all the preparations? Even the author, Luke, he was not actually present for this event, but after doing his research, he says that Martha was taking care of the preparations that had to be made. It had to be done. Something needed to be done, and she was doing it. It wasn't like she was ignoring Jesus. Martha wasn't scrolling through 3.5 hours of Instagram or TikTok reels. She wasn't out painting the town red while the most important person in history was sitting in her living room. Martha was not a bad person doing bad things. She was doing what she thought had to be done. Probably not unlike most of us, right? She saw a need and she was filling it. She felt responsible for making sure things got done. I totally get it. Martha is obviously confident, as it seems she should be, that she's in the right, that she's been done wrong. So she brings her complaint straight to Jesus. Now, I think it's important to note this. Now, I know Mary was within earshot, and as a sibling, you can probably appreciate that, but still, her complaint was directed to Christ. I think very often we take our problems to someone else, and there is a place for that, but sometimes we take to social media so the whole world, or at least our little world, can know how we've been wronged, how somebody's done us wrong. Maybe we can learn something from Martha here, that we should take our issues straight to Jesus. But I really love the next line in the text. It says, "But the Lord answered." I don't want to gloss over that too quickly. Jesus was not unaware of the situation or surprised by it at all. He wasn't surprised by Martha's reaction. It's not like Martha brought him breaking news. God is aware of our victories and our struggles. He hears our cry for help, our prayers, our complaints, and he still answers. But the Lord answers. My wife and I had the privilege of leading worship and helping with a church service with an after-school program here in Oklahoma City called Jubilee Partners. It's a branch of our Southwest Oklahoma District Church of the Nazarene, and so we get to go help do that. And one of the ladies that teaches, she bought all the kids, or her Sunday school class bought all the kids their Bible. There's 10 or 12 of them, and she's walking them through. It's just a beautiful thing to watch them learn how to read the Bible, how to find things in the text, and it's very simple. She's just, here are the books, and laying it out for them how to use it. Basically, it's a really simplified for them. But she asked them once to just open the Bible anywhere they wanted to and find 3 words that stood out to them. And I'll never forget this kid named Jake, who is still in the program. He's about 5th or 6th grade, and he found 3 words that he thought were really cool. And when it came his turn, he looked up and he said, "The Lord spoke." And I got to tell you, that spoke to my heart, because when our problems are bigger than us, the Lord speaks. When we have complaints, we have issues, the Lord speaks. When the earth needed to be made, the world needed to be made, the Lord spoke. And I just thought that was 3 words that was really cool for him to point out. God still hears our complaints, and he still answers. The Lord still speaks. So also there's a very interesting thing that I noticed when I was studying this passage. At least it's interesting for me, kind of a word nerd. The New American Standard Bible and the New Revised Standard Version, the updated version, they both use the word distracted twice. Once when the author describes what Martha is doing, and once when Jesus addresses her directly. Other translations use upset or troubled for the latter, and those are probably more accurate. But the first use of this word in the original Greek, when Luke is describing her as being distracted, I will probably butcher this, perispao, I think is how it's pronounced, which is the only time that this word is used in the whole New Testament. And it means, wait for it, distracted. But another use, according to Strong's, is that it's overoccupied or too busy. I think this sounds familiar to us, right? we get overoccupied. We get too busy. And this is how the author, Luke, describes Martha, as overoccupied, too busy. The way Jesus describes her is worried and troubled or bothered. The original Greek word for the second distracted is, again, probably going to butcher this, thoribazo. And it's also only used one time in all of the New Testament. But this word is translated well as troubled or bothered, but it comes from a root word. So they did a good job translating that one. But it comes from a root word called, it's thorobos, I think, is how you say that. That's used like 7 times in the New Testament. And each of these 7 times is translated as either riot, uproar, or commotion. Riot, uproar, or commotion. Is it possible that Jesus was telling Martha, hey, there's an uproar, a commotion, a riot happening within you? Is it possible that instead of seeing this scenario as one in which Martha is being scolded, that Jesus is just telling her, hey, I see the struggle inside you. I see the turmoil that you're facing, thinking that you have to please me with service. If we read through this too quickly, we might miss that though Martha's speech is centered on me talk, help me, Jesus doesn't scold her. And we see this by the loving way he says her name twice, Martha, Martha. Instead, it seems to me that Jesus is giving Martha this loving invitation to make the same choice that Mary did, to focus on the good portion, the good part, the one thing, his words. And Jesus also validates Mary's choice to be seated at his feet, listening to his words. Because Jesus' words are life and they're peace. And they literally are our daily bread. Mary chose to be close to Jesus, to have an encounter with him directly by hearing his words. Mary chose intimacy. Mary chose what Jesus called Martha to and what he is calling us to, the good part, the one thing that's needed. He's calling us to that as well. He's calling us to intimacy with him. He wants our focus. He wants our attention. He wants us more than he wants results from us. And you know what? He deserves it. Mary was focused on the right thing. Or maybe said better, Mary was focused on the right person, Jesus. But I think his response to Martha is what makes him the hero of the story. I think sometimes Mary gets a lot of credit, and she did choose right, but the hero of every story in Scripture is Jesus. And I think that this call to us to come, he sees our trouble, he sees our heart, he sees our struggle, and he calls us to him. And he wants us to focus on him. I love to ride bicycles. I don't get to as often as I'd like to. And I used to ride a motorcycle quite a bit as well. Since I work at an Air Force base, there are some stipulations for riding a motorcycle on base. And one of those stipulations is that you have to take a class, it's a motorcycle safety class. So, and there's this class, there's a topic that if you've ridden at all, mountain bikes or motorcycles, you'll know this topic. And it's called target fixation. And it basically means that if you're riding and you're looking at something up ahead, if you focus too much on that object, you are very, very likely to run right into it. It's important when you ride that you look ahead of where you are, but that you don't stare at anything, because you will run into what you are focused on. My father-in-law is a longtime motorcycle rider for years and years, and he used to go to Colorado and ride mountain trails up there, and he would go with a group of guys, and sometimes they would have a helmet cam, and they would video the ride, and he would bring it back, and we would watch the ride. You know, it'd be cool to watch the motorcycles going through the trail. All you'd see is the front tire, and then what was up ahead. And in one instance, we were watching, and he said, "Hey, watch this, pay attention." And we're watching, and he said, "This is the good part." So one of his buddies was riding along, and you could see this big boulder up ahead. And instead of the camera turning on the trail, the camera kept facing the boulder. And it was focused on the boulder, focused on the boulder, focused on the boulder. Then there was nothing. The camera went off. Because he was focused on the boulder, he hit the boulder. So how do we respond to this loving call from our Savior for intimacy. We change our focus. Jesus told Martha, only one thing is necessary. Only one thing is needed. We've got to focus on the one thing. Jesus is the one thing. Just like riding a bike, we will run into what has our focus. Our focus determines our reality. In an interview with Tiger Woods, a reporter asked him, how do you avoid the bunkers? And his response was very brief. He said, what bunkers? He believed that if he was too focused on not hating the bunkers, that he would most likely land in the bunkers. Distractions, good and bad, are always around us, but our focus must be on Christ alone to avoid them. Not everything else we do is bad or sinful, but what would our lives look like if for a week we gave Jesus just 5 more minutes a day? See, I'm the kind of person who usually bites off more than I can chew. But what if I gave him just 5 minutes more a day? Yes, there are still things that need to be done. This is not an excuse to be lazy or just let things go, but could we trust God maybe to help us finish or stretch our time to do so? Would it change our priorities? Or how would our lives look different if we learned that only one thing is needed and we focused on the one thing? And the one thing is Jesus. How would this behavior affect our church? Would our local congregation be more effective in our community if each of us just spent a little more time focused on Christ every single day? How might it affect our home, our relationships with our spouse, with our children, with our parents? Could us being more intentionally focused on the one thing that is needed affect our job, our community, the Little League team, the school system, our neighborhood? Is it possible that our focus on the one thing that is needed, Jesus, could have a generational effect on those we minister to? Is it at least worth a shot? A few years ago, I heard a story about a missionary that was in a third world country. Don't remember the country, don't remember the missionary. Don't remember very few details, but it was a tent revival. And the revival had gone on for a few days, maybe weeks. And most of the attenders had to walk many miles to get there. As the end of the revival approached, the host pastor invited the attenders to bring on the last night an offering of some kind to bless the missionary. So it was an agrarian culture, so most of the offerings would be crops, right? And one young man that had walked to the services from a good distance and even had to cross a river every time, he planned to bring a large basket full of vegetables from his family's garden. However, the night before it was to be brought, before the offering, there was a heavy rain which caused the river to rise. And when the young man attempted to cross the river with his basket full of vegetables, he lost his balance and he lost everything but the basket to the current. He showed up to the service with an empty basket. He was ashamed because he had no offering to give. And when the time came to present the offering, others brought their baskets of goods to the front, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't have anything but a large empty basket. So he walked up to the front. He put his empty basket on the floor, and he climbed into it. All he had to offer was himself. The missionary, through heavy tears, said, "This is exactly what God wants from each of us, just ourselves. All he wants is us." When the boy had nothing else to give, he gave himself. Jesus had everything to give, and he gave it all, just for the chance that we might want him back. He gave himself, and that is what he wants most from us, just us. He just wants us. He wants relationship. He wants intimacy. He wants our focus, and he deserves it. Only one thing is needed. We must focus on the one thing. Jesus is the one thing.